Hey everyone, welcome back to Edge of Wonder's special coverage of the election fraud. There's so much coming out by the hour on this, and the mainstream news just isn't talking about it.
Yeah, we had to look into this for ourselves. What we found was so crazy, we had to make a whole episode just about the fraud going on with the Postal Service and mail-in ballots.
Right, and so what did we find? Well, all the mail controversy actually began before the election.
Yeah, remember when everyone was riled up because we had a new Postmaster General? Back in June, Louis DeJoy was appointed the 75th Postmaster General of the U.S. How it works is that the president appoints governors with the advice and consent of the Senate.
Yeah, and as the USPS itself put it, the Board of Governors is like a board of directors of a private corporation. These governors appoint the Postmaster General, and we found that the Postmaster General's position actually has a higher pay than the Vice President of the country and is second only to the President's salary in the whole government.
So why was the media convincing everyone that this was a Trump appointee and totally evil? Well, it seems that they knew how important this position might be to achieving their goals.
Trump has talked about the Postal Service and the issues that need correcting. Especially in August, the issue blew up. If you remember, we were in the middle of coronavirus shutdowns, and the contents of the coronavirus bills were being debated with not a lot of progress.
As Politico put it, quote, House Democrats included $25 billion for the USPS in their coronavirus bill in May, along with an additional $3.6 billion in election security funding. The White House and Democratic leaders tentatively agreed to as much as $10 billion for the Postal Services and their negotiations, but that was contingent on the rest of the agreement being nailed down, which wasn't anywhere near happening, unquote.
But it wasn't as straightforward as the media was making it. The coronavirus bill was being padded with an enormous amount of money to influence the election. Trump opposed the bill.
Yeah, he was interviewed on Fox about his position. Giving that kind of money to the Postal Service would encourage voter fraud by setting up a network that would make universal mail-in voting easy and therefore fraud easy.
Nancy Pelosi said that the Democrats want to, and the White House are still miles apart on stimulus.
Well, they're right, and it's their fault. They want $3.5 billion for something that'll turn out to be fraudulent. That's election money, basically. They want $3.5 billion for the mail-in votes. Okay, universal mail-in ballots. $3.5 trillion. They want $25 billion for the post office. Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. Now, in the meantime, they aren't getting there. By the way, those are just two items. But if they don't get those two items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting.
Politico pointed out how Trump has offered praise for Postmaster General DeJoy and were careful to frame him as a Trump supporter, businessman, and a Trump donor. They said DeJoy was revamping the Postal Service's operations to aid Trump's re-election campaign.
Talk about media being partisan. DeJoy seemed okay with the agreement they finally came to with the Treasury to access the $10 billion borrowing authority. He said it was delaying an approaching liquidity crisis, which is something that has been a real threat for a long time, to be frank.
That's what Trump has been trying to say. Companies like Amazon are being unfairly enabled to defeat competitors. The postal rates are incredibly low when Trump thought they could potentially be double that amount and not cause a problem.
The U.S. Department of the Treasury did a study about the Postal Service's growing debts, and basically its financial trajectory wasn't sustainable, and it would lose tens of billions of dollars over the next decade.
As Len Stamp's News put it, the Postal Service reported a net loss of $3.9 billion in fiscal year 2018, and the agency is likely to end the current year, which was 2019, with another large deficit.
What's funny is that the media wasn't complaining about the previous Postmaster General. Megan Brennan, the one before DeJoy, had told Congress that the USPS needed to change things because profits were declining. One lobbyist and manager for the Coalition for a 21st Century Postal Service reportedly said that Megan was running the joint on baling wire and bubblegum for 5 years. She's got to be worn down, unquote.
But anyway, it's obviously DeJoy's fault that there are issues, right? I mean, just ignore DeJoy's extensive experience successfully running projects like the Postal Service, which you can even see on the USPS website. And ignore that he found that the $10 billion agreed upon was, quote, ample capacity to deliver all election mail securely and on time in accordance with delivery standards.
Weirdly, though, the National Association of Letter Carriers, a major postal worker union, endorsed Biden for president. They reportedly thought Trump was starving them of money to make voting by mail harder, even though the agreed-upon amount should have been enough.
The union's president, Frederick Rolando, had written that DeJoy's appointment came with red flags. He thought that the Trump administration was hostile toward the Postal Service itself because he called it a joke in a press conference.
The Postal Service is a joke because they're handing out packages for Amazon and other internet companies, and every time they bring a package, they lose money on it. So Amazon and other internet companies and delivery companies are dropping all of their, not all of them, but a big portion of packages and whatever else they're doing into a post office.
But that wasn't a criticism of postal workers at all. It's the way the USPS is set up and the expenditures that are a joke and need revamping.
Rolando framed it that Trump was spreading misinformation about the USPS crisis, even though it was acknowledged long before DeJoy's appointment. He said that the problems were due to the pandemic-induced recession and that Trump was trying to force the USPS out of the package delivery service by raising prices. But this totally ignored that the USPS will soon be out of any service at all if it doesn't make more money.
Yeah, this guy really hates Trump. He questioned DeJoy just for the potential of the postmaster supporting Trump in the future. He even threatened that if DeJoy wouldn't work with the NALC, they will defend themselves. Now, does this sound like a postal strike threat to you?
Or maybe it's indicative of something more sinister. There are a lot of postal workers who have been coming out with allegations of election fraud that seem to have been coordinated.
The U.S. Postal Service sent inspectors to a post office branch in Traverse City after concerns of possible fraud. The Office of the Inspector General had federal investigators at the branch on Barlow Street today. It comes after a group known as Project Veritas posted a video which claims to identify a postal supervisor allegedly instructing employees to take absentee ballots received on Wednesday and backdate them with a postmark for Tuesday.
So Project Veritas has been coming out with explosive videos of insider whistleblowers revealing what's going on with voter fraud. One video showed how the postal workers in Erie, Pennsylvania were instructed to separate out ballots after Election Day for backdating.
All these ballots that are coming in today, tomorrow, yesterday, are all supposed to be postmarked the 3rd.
Do you believe that order still stands?
Yes. No doubt, considering that they still want us to pick up ballots tomorrow.
Even as of November 5th, they were separating ballots and giving them to supervisors who were then postmarking the mail at the office to take them right to the ballot box, backdated with November 3rd. The local postmaster told them to sort out the late ballots even on November 6th.
They had a specific meeting, safety meeting, where one of the higher-ups, Rob and Stephanie, basically told us to make sure we pick up the ballots and give them directly to the supervisor.
This whistleblower is already being considered a hero. He came out with his real name, Richard Hopkins, and said he'll testify about the backdating of ballots. His coworkers reportedly feel the same way, but are scared to say anything publicly. Of course, WAPO and the Democratic Oversight Committee are claiming he recanted after signing his initial affidavit.
They say Hopkins signed another affidavit recanting his claims on November 9th when he talked to investigators. The problem with this report is that Hopkins said in a YouTube video on Tuesday, the 10th, that he hadn't recanted at all. So what's the truth?
My name is Richard Hopkins. I am the postal employee who came out and whistle blew on the Erie, PA Postal Service, postal office. I am right at this very moment looking at an article written by Washington Post. It says that I fabricated the allegations of ballot tampering. I'm here to say that I did not recant my statements. That did not happen. That is not what happened. And you will find out tomorrow. And I would like that the Washington Post recant their wonderful little article that they decided to throw out there out of random.
Well, James O'Keefe tweeted on November 10th, quote, "Video not false. USPS officials stand by his original affidavit. We have tapes of Fed agents who put pressure on him to sign something he didn't understand. They wouldn't let him leave. He's doubling down. You're trying to get us deplatformed. You're losing."
Blue checkmarks were calling for Project Veritas deplatforming based on their video being false. But what happens if it's not false and all of these people are smearing both Project Veritas and this brave whistleblower?
It also totally ignores the other legitimate cases of voter fraud that Project Veritas has reported on that everyone else is ignoring.
Yeah, Project Veritas found that the same thing happened in Michigan. A worker at the Traverse City Post Office in the Barlow branch said that his boss issued a directive on November 4th to collect any ballots to backdate with stamps.
Tell us where you work.
I work in the Traverse City Post Office, more specifically the Barlow branch.
Your boss told you and your colleagues something that shocked you this morning. What was it?
We were issued a directive this morning to collect any ballots we find in mailboxes, collection boxes, just outgoing mail in general, separate them at the end of the day so that they could hand stamp them with the previous day's date. Today is November 4th, for clarification.
Who is your boss, and what is his title?
Jonathan would be a direct supervisor, yes. As of right now, he is the opening supervisor for the Barlow branch post office. So and this is anecdotal, a carrier down in another office said they watched the postmaster doing it.
A carrier in another office said they watched their postmaster doing it, even though clerks should be normally doing that kind of job.
The Michigan Court of Appeals said ballots have to be received before the close of polls on Election Day. So to be clear, this is illegal. This worker came forward because he knew how corrupt this is and that the post office's political leanings made it even more suspicious.
It's not like this is the first time this kind of voter fraud has been an issue in the mail. It's just that this is the first time there's been a chance for it to be as widespread and hard to see.
So should we take interviews at face value? We think anyone with evidence of voter fraud should report it and go on the record. So let's get into some people who are doing just that.
On November 8th, a whistleblower from Clark County Elections Department in Nevada signed a sworn affidavit about the extreme voting fraud he personally witnessed.
This person was a poll worker during early voting from October 17th to the 30th, working 13 of the 14 days to check voters in and verify signatures. But he started having concerns about election polling place intimidation and election fraud.
According to the affidavit, his team leader and assistants told people wanting to register to vote and didn't have a Nevada ID or license that they could just go to the parking lot, make an appointment with the DMV to get that identification, and bring proof of their appointment back up to the poll workers. They would be allowed to be registered. They could then vote with a provisional ballot even though their appointments weren't until January of 2021.
And this was being allowed at all polling places of the valley, he was told. They just had to put 2 zeros on the DMV confirmation number and put it where the identification number should go when they filled in the registration form. But that wasn't all.
No, it wasn't. This person said that every day of early voting, a Biden-Harris bus, tent, or table was in the parking lot of the voting center offering food, drink, and memorabilia to voters. They had speakers, dancers, and music as a visible feature in the narrow parking lot.
Remember, there are laws against electioneering too close to a polling place. According to the National Conference of State Legislators in Nevada, you can't campaign, have campaign materials, influence voters, or project sounds referring to candidates or issues within 100 feet of the entrance of a polling place.
And this affidavit said that the team leader at the Nevada polling place had to go out several times a day to tell the Biden-Harris team to stay 100 feet away. They would give people signs to carry up to the door when coming to vote too.
For 7 or 8 days of the 14 days, this worker was there. The Biden-Harris bus and/or van was at his polling place. On October 28th or 29th, when the worker was doing laps outside the building for exercise at lunchtime, this person said they saw something shocking.
Quote, I personally witnessed 2 people handing multiple unopened mail-in ballot envelopes to 2 other people who then opened and filled out the ballots against the side of the Biden-Harris van. The same 2 people who marked the ballots then put the marked ballots in official pink and white envelopes. These individuals were not poll workers.
He goes on to say, quote, by my final walking lap, there were 5 or 6 additional people who formed a human wall, which moved as I walked by, apparently in an attempt to block my view of the 4 people who were opening envelopes, marking ballots, and placing those ballots in the pink and white return envelopes. When the moving human wall of people noticed me walking by, they continued moving to block my view as I walked.
This person reported it to their team leader, who said she called the county elections office, but someone there told her nothing could be done about the ballots or envelopes being handled outside the Biden-Harris area. The team leader told this whistleblower that, quote, ballot harvesting is legal in Nevada, unquote. Excuse me?
Yeah, except this person hadn't witnessed ballot harvesting. The poll worker was seeing people marking ballots themselves, not collecting others' filled out ballots. And as a poll worker, this whistleblower knew what these looked like because he was working with these envelopes regularly.
The whistleblower said people regularly walked in with multiple ballots, but they weren't allowed to talk to the monitors or observers. This whistleblower even saw one person who was angry someone else had voted on his behalf. But what did he overhear when this happened?
The team leader and the county election department had a conversation about whether they should void the ballot that was sent and allow this man to vote.
What kind of gods do these people think they are to decide who's allowed to vote or not? I guess if they're willing to look past the Biden-Harris group outside, they'll do this too.
What's crazy is that as of November 9th, Nevada's Attorney General still hadn't taken any action to investigate these claims too. We all had learned about it on Twitter, but why are these places focusing on the mail-in voting? General Flynn had some ideas. Here's a clip.
When the votes didn't get to the numbers that they needed, now we come in with the mail-in ballots. And I strongly believe that they are going to find mail-in ballot problems like we already have seen that were after the fact to get to the numbers to achieve a victory. I'll go back to the beginning, Carl, and I'll stop. This is about our national security. This is about our economic prosperity. And this is about our constitutional rights. If we don't get this election right, we lose in all 3 of those cases.
Trump has been talking about how the mail-in ballot deadline in Pennsylvania has been extended by 3 days. There's actually a lawsuit by the Trump campaign challenging the handling of mail-in ballots and wanting to prevent a certification of outcome until it's all sorted out.
Yeah, the Trump campaign sued Pennsylvania's Secretary of the Commonwealth, Catherine Bachvar, and the Board of Elections in 7 Pennsylvania counties. And they just happen to have the highest number of mail-in ballots for Biden.
They want to prohibit the lawsuit's defendants from certifying the results of the general elections, including the tabulation of absentee and mail-in ballots that watchers were prevented from observing and ones that had errors that they weren't allowing to be corrected.
But what happened? Well, Pennsylvania amended its election laws in response to COVID-19 situation with Act 77. For one, voters who had filled out ballots incorrectly or incompletely would be declared void rather than giving those people a notice and allowing them to fix the problems.
During pre-canvass time, election officials would open absentee and mail-in ballots and tally the votes, and they were prohibited from recording or publishing the votes from pre-canvassed ballots. And because ballots couldn't be opened before 7 a.m. on Election Day, there was no plan to allow errors to be fixed either.
Yeah, and Pennsylvania knew that an unprecedented number of votes would be mail-in. 37% of all votes cast in Pennsylvania reportedly ended up being mail-in ballots. That's more than 2.5 million people. But they still didn't make sure that Act 77's provisions were complied with to prevent fraud, as the lawsuit documented occurring in numerous instances.
The counties that reported large vote totals for Biden had numbers statistically improbable, according to those filing the suit. They don't really have faith in those in charge accurately certifying the results of the election if all this happened, so the suit is to prevent that.
Well, that's where the U.S. Supreme Court comes in. There's a challenge to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision that allows 3 days beyond the allotted cutoff date in their election code for mail-in ballots to be received. Republicans in Pennsylvania want to intervene in ballots that came between November 4th and 6th because the ones they received before Election Day seem to be handled improperly with regards to Act 77.
So how do we solve this? Well, Pennsylvania lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in the General Assembly have called for an audit of the 2020 election. They want the results only to be certified after the public has a look at the audit. Sounds reasonable to me. Who could argue?
And they say they're in the unique position of being able to review such a highly charged issue because they're politically diverse and so close to the people. They want it in full view of the people of Pennsylvania. But did the governor like that?
Nope. Governor Wolf's office responded to the proposal that Pennsylvania had a secure election and falsely claimed that allegations of fraud and illegal activity had been repeatedly debunked and dismissed by the courts. He said that those trying to have an audit were attacking and undermining our democracy and should be rejected. Oh, or perhaps what you just said is undermining our democracy.
Right. Imagine if this was the other way around and this was a Republican governor doing this. Think about that for a moment. He also said that all counties had canvass observers from all parties throughout the voting process, and insinuations otherwise are lies. I guess presumably this means no fraud could have occurred, but we've seen evidence of this happening, so he's reacting like he's personally insulted at the idea of his area having been used for fraud. I mean, if there is no issue, he should welcome officials to investigate it.
Right, Ben. We can't let emotions be a part of this, though. This is about election integrity. When Governor Wolf's office asserted they would count every vote and protect the count of every vote, he never mentioned the word legal with vote.
Our democracy has withstood challenges before, and for over 200 years we have upheld and strengthened our commitment to basic fairness and due process. And I have full faith that we will similarly meet this moment, and I will do everything within my power to ensure that the results are fair and that every vote is counted.
And GOP officials have witnessed mail-in shenanigans at polls firsthand too, and we have contacts who say they are not happy about it.
But it's not just the politicians who are unhappy. Regular people want to see their votes count and matter, and some of them are shocked at how they're being taken advantage of.
Hashtag Maidengate was recently trending on Twitter because people were using women's maiden names to vote. People created fake voter registrations and requested fraudulent ballots using other people's maiden names.
The story broke on November 10th by someone whose mother's vote had been stolen in her previous home of Michigan when her maiden name was used to vote by someone else.
Of course, though, the account of this person who first discovered it was quickly suspended. At Some Bitch I Know, or L, recommended people look up, quote, dead names, maiden names, divorce names, adopted names, check them all, hashtag Maidengate.
We also found that this is happening to people even without the use of maiden names. One woman who voted in person for Trump in Texas was reportedly shocked that voting records showed she had also voted in Orange County, California via mail-in ballot. Seriously.
But she had moved from California to Texas a year ago. When she checked her voter status in California, it said she was registered as a permanent voter by mail voter in Orange County. Can you guess what her party preference was listed as?
Democrat. And it said she'd been mailed a ballot on October 5th and that the mail-in ballot had been received and accepted in Orange County on Election Day. Of course, This is despite the fact that she hadn't voted in California at all. She never voted by mail in her life and hadn't voted in California since 2012.
And recently, there was a lot of people that just moved away from California. So I wonder how much voter fraud is really going on there.
Probably because of this.
Exactly. So the records also said she had voted in California in 2016 when she hadn't voted at all. According to Zero Hedge, quote, the Trump administration is currently pursuing litigation in a number of states in an effort to investigate allegations of vote fraud in numerous key swing states.
But what does this all mean? Well, mail-in voting was a fail. It was full of corruption. Like Trump has said, the Postal Service needs saving. So does that mean all hope is lost and Biden is in office because of all of this fraud?
Remember that the media doesn't get to choose the president. The people do. If we talk about and report all of these instances of voter fraud, we'll bring the corruption to the light.
That's our job as responsible American citizens. We must safeguard the integrity of our elections and make sure that all legal votes are counted while all illegal votes aren't. That's how it works no matter what politics you have. And we know it will all come out in the end.
And people are coming out. The Freemason insider we know and interviewed told us that the U.S. Postal Service is heavily under the Rothschilds family control, which is another reason why Trump is fighting against this.
Yeah, he said that the Rothschilds have been watching over this for years and years to see who's mailing to whom, what kind of business is being conducted, who could be considered a threat to them, and to monitor the population. We're about to release our interview with this insider, so be on the lookout for that on edgeofwonder.tv over the next several weeks.
Yes, all of this needs to get out in the open and be exposed. You won't believe what we found out about other countries influencing our election too. In our next installment of this Edge of Wonder special report on the election fraud, we'll get into how the CCP has actually been involved. So make sure you don't miss that one.
We love you all, and we're all in this together during this insane time. Keep the faith, and until next time, we'll see you out
on the edge.
America, land of the free, home of the brave. But what happens when countries with other motives try to muscle in? There's a red dragon lurking in the shadows, and its name is the Chinese Communist Party. Find out how China conspired to commit voter fraud right here in the US of A. And who helped them do it? Join us for our special election coverage in Edge of Wonder's special report, Exposing Fraud, Part 4. Pre-release on edgeofwonder.tv.